Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tim. In a moment, John will be talking about the fall of the CSS Albemarle. But from now on, I just want to let you know that our programs will be starting at noon, and they will also be about 30 minutes long for the presentation. Just want to let y'all know that our next JVQ programming is going to be June 12th at noon. That's going to be about floating sculptures, the art of the decoy, which would be pretty cool. Our next Civil War related JVQ program will be on June 19th. Again, that will be another 30-minute program. And that's going to be about a follow-up on Fort Fisher. So like always, we're going to be taking questions in the comment section, and we'll be answering them in about a 15-minute session at the end of the program. So if you like this kind of stuff, we ask that you please like and subscribe and comment and be engaged. We love that kind of thing. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Good day, everyone. And today, which makes this program so relevant, is that we're talking about the Battle of Albemarle Sound for the first part of this program. And today is the anniversary of the Battle of Albemarle Sound, May 5th, 1864. And, you know, the whole idea of the Albemarle proving is, and by the way, I had some minor surgery on my ear, so I think my new name is Johnny Van Gogh. So, but I can still hear. Anyway, that was my joke for the day. So let's get serious. The CSS Albemarle is proved its worth when they won the Battle of Plymouth, along with Hoke's division, liberating Plymouth, Edenton, Little Washington. It was really an important event for the Confederacy. Now, the Confederates, Robert Hoke's division stays in North Carolina with the idea that they want to move against New Bern, North Carolina, because up the Neuse River is where they're building the CSS Neuse. Now, the Neuse was the same design as sister ship to our favorite ship, the Albemarle, and so it was finally finished in early May. Actually, I would say it could have been launched even sooner, but the thing is, they're still putting on courses of iron, and so, but they got to get it in the river because of the spring rains that are going to enable the ship to work its way down the Neuse River. Well, as soon as they launch the ship, they go about 200 yards and boom, they run aground. Now, the idea the Confederates had was that if they brought the Neuse down to New Bern and they had the Albemarle, that as PGT Beauregard would say, with its assistance, I consider the capture of New Bern easy. But without the Neuse, it was a big reach. But James Wallace Cook, the commander of the Albemarle, you know, he agreed in correspondence with Beauregard that, yes, I will go ahead and launch an attack. Now, I have to tell you, his ship had a range of 150 miles, and to get to New Bern, he had to go through the Albemarle, the Croatan, and the Pamlico Sound. Cook also realized he had to do it because the entire Confederacy was watching. Their dreams of victory hinged upon the success of the Albemarle. He had no choice but to carry out his mission against the Union squadron defending the I'm trying to get a picture up here. There we go. So you can see there's the Albemarle, once again, diamond casemate. It is a very powerful ship, considering how it was built and everything. Nevertheless, the Federals knew how dangerous this ship was. So as a result of it, then commander of the North Atlantic blockading squadron is going to actually set up a flotilla of ships, wooden gunboats, under the command of Commander May Lakaton Smith. I think I got that name right. Who was, he had his flag in what is known as a double ender. Double enders used to be ferry boats, and they were great for working up and down the rivers of North Carolina and Virginia. He is going to put his flag in the Mattabesset, and which is one of those great side wheelers. He also has with him the other double enders known as the Wysingham of the U.S. Miami, and then also the USS Saugus. Now, these all have a pretty heavy battery of 200-pounder Parrott rifles and 4 9-inch Dahlgren guns, along with several other smaller cannons, howitzers, but that's their main armament. Now, these were all assembled and off of what's known as Sandy Point, which is after you come out of the Roanoke River into the Sound, you have to pass this point. It's kind of where it's a little narrower. And so Smith's plan is to take his double enders and just run right by the Albemarle, trying to pound it with its artillery. So it is going to be, this is going to be the scene of the battle. Now, the Albemarle is going to be supported by the cotton plant and the bombshell, but both of them had been captured from the Federals. And so as they come down through the Sounds, there is Smith's squadron ready to stop them. Now, Cook tries to ram the Mattabesset, who is the lead ship. However, the Mattabesset, being a paddle wheeler, gets to round the bow of the Albemarle, so therefore it misses the danger to the ship. So then, as they round it, the Albemarle sends a shot into the Mattabesset. And the first shot, it was said that actually damaged the ship's launch and were just very, very effective. Now, remember, the Albemarle has 2 6.4-inch rifled Brook cannon. Now, what's going to happen is, as the Mattabesset passes by, they pound the ship with their heavy artillery. And according to one crew member, John Patrick of the Albemarle, that one shot knocked us in, but not all the way through. Splinters of wood flew about. It was the 3rd or 4th shot that struck the Albemarle's stern 6.4-inch Brook gun, knocking 23 inches off the gun. Did the Confederates care? No, they did not. And in fact, they were very determined to keep firing. They had no choice. They only have 2 guns. So then what's going to happen is that the Albemarle was then shot into the Mattabesset in a way that one shot hits one of the main guns of the Mattabesset, and the gun is disabled, and every man at the gun is either killed or wounded. So now, after the Mattabesset passes, it now is going to go and attack the bombshell, and they engage a little bit. But meanwhile, the Saugus and the Wysingham will actually come past the Ironclad. They send broadsides into the ram to no effect. The Saugus then went and encountered the bombshell and actually will capture the bombshell. And so the Saugus, that puts it about 300 yards away from the Albemarle. So the idea is to come, build up your speed. The ship is commanded by Lieutenant Commander Francis Rowe, a very distinguished naval officer. And so he decides he is going to ram and you can see how the ships are working around in this image. This is the battlefield, by the way. That happens to be Commander Smith, and that happens to be Francis Rowe. This is showing the crowded engagement that's happening at Albemarle Sound, but this is the story. This is, of course, James Wallace Cook, but here you go. That is the Miami, which is going to figure in very closely. And so anyway, what's going to happen is that the Secaucus is going to be out there 300 yards away, or so some people say 400 yards, builds up to speed, and it rams the Albemarle, hitting the Albemarle just after her starboard quarter, where the casemate becomes the diamond edge. So it smacks it, and actually Cook is in big trouble because the Albemarle is leaning into the water, and water is coming in through the gun ports. Actually, Cook will say, "Stand to your guns. If we must sink, let us go down like brave men." And at that moment, the Albemarle sent a shell through the Secaucus hull, which is already, the Secaucus has already been damaged. They had this beak put on that was brass, and it got damaged when it hit the knuckle of the Albemarle. But then I got to tell you, as the Cook orders it hard to port, then they fire a shot that these guys are so close that scorches the paint off of the Secaucus. Oh my goodness. And so what's going to happen, the next shot from the Albemarle is going to tumble through the Secaucus and pierce its boilers. Steam runs through the entire vessel, and as a result of that, the Secaucus breaks off action and drifted out of range. Now, I got to tell you that the repaired Miami, which we see right here, was fitted with a spar torpedo as well as a seine net. Now, the spar torpedo means I got to get right up to it, and I'm going to lower that spar torpedo down and blow up the Albemarle. And the seine net is so that I can throw it over the propellers and foul the engines of the Albemarle. Well, I got to tell you, as they try to get in position, a shot from the Albemarle is going to actually hit the rudder of the Miami, and then another shot wrecks the pilot house. Another shot goes through the captain's cabin. So the Miami fell back from its second close encounter. Remember, it was up there in Plymouth, April 19th, and barely survived. So as that follows, the Wycliffe and the Commodore Hull, which is another double ender but much smaller, was a ferry boat. And as nightfall began to shroud the battlefield, I've got to tell you that the Albemarle, which has been damaged, once again, remember, it lost 23 inches off of one of its guns. Some of its iron plate has been broken away from its 18-inch pine and oak backing. And so that's described by the one John Patrick about almost stoving it in. So, and the Albemarle is running out of fuel. So to get back, and the funnel is perforated with shot. So just low draft. And so the only way they're going to get back to Plymouth is they throw butter, lard, turpentine, you name it, to get those fires as hot as they can, and then fall back to Plymouth, North Carolina. Now, the battle was a tactical draw. The Albemarle was damaged, some people say seriously, but those things were easy to repair. You just had to get a new brook gun, and you had to readjust the plates and repair part of the wood backing. So she goes up to Plymouth, and that is where she'll have those. That's where she'll get the repairs. Now, she's a force in being. Actually, Francis Rowe of the Sacacus called the Albemarle more formidable than the Merrimac or Atlanta, for our solid 100-pounder rifle shot flew into splinters upon her iron plates. Now, that force in being is so important for the Confederates, because it is saving this rich agricultural region. Now, Gideon Wells, Abraham Lincoln are tired with S.P. Lee. You know, he's been mediocre commander. He's done his best, but the more dynamic officer is going to take command of the North Atlantic blockading squadron, and his name happens to be David Dixon Porter, stepbrother to David Farragut. He is actually a very pompous and always trying to put himself forward as the great leader. Well, when he takes over command of the North Atlantic blockading squadron, he thinks one of his first duties is going to be to get that ram. So he sends an order to all the wooden gunboats. There is but one chance for there's Porter. There's but one chance for wooden vessels in attacking an ironclad. You will make a dash at her with every vessel you have and lay her on board, using canister to fire into her ports, while the ram strikes her steering apparatus and disables her. You will see that every vessel is provided with proper grapnels to hold on while going alongside, and a boarding party will be appointed to lash the ships together. Even if half your vessels are sunk, you must presume this course. Well, there are a lot of other ideas that are going to be put forth to kind of deal with this problem, the problem of the Albemarle. And one comes from this man, Lieutenant William Barker Cushing. And Cushing is kind of, this daring individual. And he says, well, look, I can go get this. He has two plans, but the main plan is that he goes up to New York and he purchases for the U.S. Navy two smaller cutters, you might call them. And they are called Picket Boat 1 and Picket Boat 2. They're listed as being 30 feet in length. However, I've also seen 40 feet and 47 feet in length. So the official Navy document says they're 30 feet, but what am I going to do? So anyway, he bought these boats, and he actually will add a 12-pounder Dahlgren boat howitzer at the bow, and he fits the vessel or the vessels with a spar torpedo. Oh my gosh. Now, this is kind of crazy. So they come down from New York, they go into the Delaware Bay, they go through the Delaware Chesapeake Canal, come down the canal. A terrible storm hits them as they're reaching towards Norfolk, and that storm is actually going to result in Picket Boat number 2 being run aground in Wanaco Bay, Virginia, and captured by the Confederates. But Picket Boat number 1 will arrive safely in Albemarle Sound on 24 October 1864. Now, the Confederates have been talking about how could they use the ram. And actually, James Cook, kind of worn out from his arduous duties, he is promoted to captain and is in command of that district of naval operations. So, which is very, very good, because the outstanding officer. Now, so in his place, they're going to name one of the most daring Confederate naval officers, a man known as Lieutenant John Newland Maffitt. And for you all who live on the peninsula, if you go down Cedar Lane, his house is at the very end of Cedar Lane in Newport News, at one time called Caryville, which was bought from Maffitt by Captain Nelson. And so during the war, it's still there. It's still there today. And so basically, John Newland Maffitt was commander of the CSS Florida. And the Florida was the second most successful commerce raider by the Confederacy. They racked up, I think it's 47 prizes. And so he actually becomes ill. And so he gets yellow fever at one time. This guy is dynamic. So, but by being at sea so long, he becomes ill. He's going to be replaced by Charles Morris as commander of the Florida. Florida gets captured. That's another story. However, Maffitt is placed in charge of the Albemarle, and Maffitt is this one dynamic person. And so right away, he plans an offensive against the Union wooden warships. He knows his ram can destroy them. If they're not really waiting for him, he can catch up and surprise them. And, you know, the ram alone, we know, will sink a ship, and their guns are very, very effective. Now, when Cook, the former Rams commander, learns of Maffitt's plans, he goes, oh, no. You can't do that, because the Albemarle might be captured or destroyed during its next outing. And we need to keep the Albemarle as a force in being. Okay, that's like the English fleet during World War I and the German fleet in World War I. They're kind of opposing each other, only fought really once, but nevertheless. Now, so Maffitt, when he's not allowed to go do the swashbuckling stuff, he then is going to, in essence, say, I need to be replaced. And his replacement is going to be Lieutenant Alexander Worley, who's originally from South Carolina. He was a midshipman in the U.S. Navy in 1850 or 40, fought in the Mexican War. His first duty assignment was on the USF Constellation. This guy's dynamic. During the Civil War, he is the commander of the CSS Manassas, the first Confederate ironclad. Now, I got to tell you that, he has a log boom around the Albemarle. Everything seems to be protected. Now, Cushing now is in the Albemarle Sound. He's itching to get at the Albemarle. So Admiral Porter will say, well, go ahead with your operation. But then he writes Commander William H. Combe and says, I've directed Lieutenant Cushing to go down in a steam launch and, if possible, destroy this ram with torpedoes. I have not great confidence in his success, but you will afford him all the assistance in your power and keep boats ready to pick him up in case of failure. Well, on October 26, Cushing's launch comes out of the Sound en route there. She runs aground on a sandbar on October 27th, early in the morning. The 26th, she runs on the sandbar at 10:30. High tide comes the next morning at 2:30. She floats off the sandbar, and she continues into the Roanoke River. Now, he has 14 men in his steam-powered picket boat. He is towing a schooner with 8 under men. So he is going to get underway. The cutter's there in case they just need more men, because actually Cushing wants to capture the Albemarle alive. Well, I have to say that's not going to happen. So is Cushing on the evening of the 27th and 28th will pass the south field where there's some Confederate pickets on lookout, and they see in the dark, they see Cushing's boat coming up. They don't know who he is. They set a bonfire on the shore to light up the river, and then they will start shooting with pistols and rifles. The men on the Albemarle are getting their Brook gun loaded. Cushing comes in and makes a huge circle, right? And he heads right towards the Albemarle. However, when he gets within really vision, and remember, bullets are falling around, he says his coat was pierced by 4 mini balls and one creased his hand. And so these guys are in serious trouble. So Cushing brings it in, and then somehow he sees the torpedo boom. But guess what? He also sees all the slime that's over the boom. And so he figures that what's he going to do? Because the boom's far enough out, you can't use your 14-foot long spar torpedo. So Cushing, under fire, makes a huge another circle and runs at the Albemarle at top speed. Now, I mean, just remember, the light is like dim, and it is an eerie scene. So Cushing, as they came, stood bravely at the bow. I mean, this guy is a dangerous person and a daring person. So the Picket Boat number 1 runs up over the log boom, and Cushing calmly takes the spar and brings it under the Albemarle. Just as he pulls the lanyard, the Confederates pull the lanyard of the 6.4-inch Brook gun, and the Picket Boat is smashed, but the torpedo was very successful, creating a hole large enough for a horse and cart to ride through. Well, I got to tell you, Lieutenant Worley will say water gained at us so fast that all exertions were fruitlessly, merely leaving her shield and smokestack out. It was a sad scene, which was witnessed the next morning by all the Confederates. The stainless banner, that's the second national Confederate flag, laid limp on the Albemarle's flagstaff. It was now clear that the Confederates no longer could control eastern North Carolina. Now, Worley will remove the Brook guns from the wrecked Alabama to defend Plymouth. However, they're not enough, and Plymouth will be abandoned by the Confederates on October 31st. Meanwhile, let me tell you, Cushing is blown off, the boat. He calmly, when he's in the water, takes off his shoes, takes off his coat. And now remember, this is October, so the water's a little cold. So he tries to swim to safety. He makes it to shore. He actually meets up with another person, E.J. Hampton, who will also survive. And Cushing will use his arms as paddles. He brings the skiff as far as he could. He's freezing. He almost gets captured twice, but he meets an African-American when he's hiding up on the shore, and the African-American tells him that Confederate boat has been destroyed. Cushing, knew that everything was great. So Cushing will, I'm in big trouble with my slides. I forget them. This shows the scene of the explosion. There's several pretty neat ones. And so what we're going to happen is that Cushing will be the hero of all times. The Albemarle later will be raised by the Union, towed to Norfolk, Gosport Navy Yard. A lot of people call it Norfolk Navy Yard. It's Gosport. And that's how it looks. You can see the great damage to the whole one part of the diamond has been lifted up and torn away from its wooden backing. So this ship is going to go up to Gosport Navy Yard. They consider placing her into service. They have no need. She's in dry dock. So they sell the ship in 1867 for scrap. And they received $79,000 for it, which got to be split amongst the survivors of the attack. And even David Dixon Porter gets a share. So you can well imagine that, thinking of split now, 11 people were actually they were captured, and most of them went to Andersonville, the POW camp. There are 2 people that are listed as missing. Then there's Hampton, who's just survived. That closes out the crew of 14, and then Cushing. What they did was one of the most bravest things that we've seen in the Civil War in a naval action. What they also did was put an end to the threat of the Confederacy's recontrolling eastern North Carolina. And that today, I think my time is up for my lecture. And so that today is the end of my story about the CSS Albemarle, that cornfield ironclad that once terrorized the entire Union fleet, but yet it is going to be sunk by a new technology, which will be the spar torpedo. So anyway, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask me.
All right, John, we got one here. Why did they call it a picket boat?
Oh, because the picket boat was designed to, especially when you're working in the James River, where the Confederates have a fleet and being in Richmond. And so the picket boat stays out ahead of the main squadron. So if they see something coming down river, they get to make a big announcement, a warning that the enemy is coming. The greatest story about a picket boat is dealing with the CSS Atlanta. And actually, they sent a boat down, a picket boat, and they have like 8 Irish conscripts in the Navy. And then they have this one lieutenant. And the one lieutenant, it's a warm night. He takes off his coat. He says, mind the coat. It's got a pistol in it. Well, what do these guys do? They don't want to be in the Confederate Navy. They pull the gun out and steal the picket boat and go down to the Union fleet. So picket boats were very important. This is the first time a picket boat is going to be used as this purpose. The Confederates, and I'll tell you on another story, will actually have purpose-built boats to launch torpedoes like the Squib, the Hunley, the David. Okay, next question.
Yeah, we got another one here. If the Ironclad fires many of its shells, does it change its displacement in the water?
Of course it does. And because the greatest example is during the Battle of Hampton Roads. On March 9th, Worden sees the Virginia, the Merrimack, rising a little high out of the water, so he can actually see the propeller spin in the water. So, and why is it rising high? Because it's using all its gunpowder, its shells, its solid shot, and coal. And so, yes, you're going to ride high. And so Worden takes that time to try and ram the fantail of the Virginia. And that's when he will be wounded and the battle breaks off.
Cool. And then I got another one here. Did any of the Albemarle relics survive?
Oh, yes. There are 2 great ones that I know about. I mean, big ones. There is the smokestack of the Albemarle at the Museum of the Albemarle in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Then you actually have one of the 6.4-inch Brook guns that is going to be over at NATO headquarters. And when you go into this one building, there are 2 Brook guns. One is from the Albemarle, and the other one is from the Tennessee. Oh my gosh, two of the greatest Confederate ironclads, and yet they're there. It'd be pretty hard to go visit the ones in in NATO, but you can go down to the Museum of the Albemarle and see the smoke deck all day long, and it is pretty awesome when you think of the story of the Albemarle.
Great, John. Okay, so it looks like we got about one more question. Were there any ironclads defending Wilmington?
Oh, yes. Wilmington had a pretty good series of shipyards. It's just that Wilmington's a long way away from Tredegar, and they just don't make good ironclads there. The first one they build is going to be the CSS North Carolina. Problem number one, they build it out of green lumber. Big mistake, because that's going to make it start leaking and rotting. And mistake number two, they didn't put copper sheathing on the hull. The copper sheathing means that marine growth, certain worms are not going to bore into your hull and reduce your speed, but also cause your ship to get a leak. The North Carolina, to keep it afloat in early 1864, they had to pump it every day, all day long. This is going to be down at Smithfield, North Carolina. Finally, in September of 1864, the North Carolina will just sink, and they say, well, we'll take the armor off of it because the Confederates are already building another ironclad. Meanwhile, they'd already finished another ironclad called the CSS Raleigh. And on May 6, 1864, the Raleigh is sent out. Now, I gotta tell you, this is a river ironclad. So it has to go over the bar, the new inlet next to Fort Fisher, and attack the Union blockaders. Well, it's dark. It's commanded by Lieutenant J. Pembroke Jones. I got to just tell you, if you're from around this region, Hilton Village is the farm Jones owned and named it his farm Hilton. Well, anyway, another long story. So anyway, he steams around at night, fires a couple shells, doesn't do anything effective, and then comes into the new inlet. Big trouble with the new inlet is that it's got a couple of shifting shoals that change almost every day, and the Raleigh will run aground. When low tide comes, the weight of the casemate and the guns rest on the hull, and the hull will break its back. Otherwise, its keel breaks. And so it's left there as a forlorn turtle. Meanwhile, the Confederates are building yet another ironclad. And I got to tell you, the Raleigh and the North Carolina are the Richmond-class ironclads. The Wilmington is going to be laid down. However, it is incomplete when Fort Fisher falls and John Schofield and the Union Army will reach Wilmington and the ship will be blown up. So it's really one of the saddest tales of Confederate ironclads during the Civil War was the Wilmington Squadron.
Thank you, John. That's about all that we have time for today.
Okay. I just want to say to everyone, please like and subscribe and send us a message. Maybe suggest some topics you want me to talk about. Maybe you just want to see us to do more of these. Next week, I am doing something different, which is going to be called the Art of the Decoy. I am a decoy collector. I actually was a consultant to a decoy museum, one of the best, called the Havre de Grace Decoy Museum in Havre de Grace, Maryland, center of decoy making, called by Jeopardy the decoy capital of the world. But the following week, I'll be back on the Civil War, and I'm going to be talking about the fall of the Gibraltar of the South. Yes, the fall of Fort Fisher. So Until then, I will be gone with this, so I'll no longer be Johnny Van Gogh. I'll be back to being JVQ, John Quarstein, the Director Emeritus of the USS Monitor Center at the Mariners Museum and Park. So thank you for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.